remember, so the last time we talked extensively, I think we finalized EC2, right? So we did everything about EC2. So you understand that EC2 is a compute, right? Um, but again, in the cloud, right, compute is one entity, but storage is also another entity. And I think the cloud, why it's different in the cloud is that like traditionally, your laptop has like a hard drive that is connected to it, right? But in some cases, you can also connect like an external hard drive to it, right? But it's still a physical connection. Unlike in the cloud, most of the storage that you see, they are all network devices. Okay, so what it means is that it's not physically attached to the device, but rather it's like a network device that is connected. Like it's a network device. That means you have to reach it via the network. Okay, but we've seen that compute and storage, they go hand in hand, right? And because for the most part, there is no way that you are going to have like a compute that is not storing something. So usually when you hear compute, there is always storage, around it. So what is our aim here today is to understand what are the storage options, right? The storage options around EC2 as a compute service. Okay. So yeah, exactly. So it's exactly what I've mentioned before. The learning objective today is really to understand the different options. Remember that there is storage, right? That goes hand in hand with EC2, right? But your role as a cloud engineer or cloud practitioner is for you to be able to know when are you meant to use which storage, okay? And that's why we're doing this. Because it's not just you knowing. When you start the practice itself, right? When you go into the field, when you start doing what you're required to do, it's going to be one of the challenges you're also trying to solve, right? Because some storage are faster than some, right? So these flavors of storage is what gives people different options in the cloud. And like I've always told you, I said that variability in the cloud is why everyone is going to it. The fact that you can have many compute options, you can have many storage options, you can have many database options. So there's usually something that suits your use case. Okay, some people they want very like if a file storage that is very fast. Some people just want more or less like a place to store like a cold storage or somewhere to archive even data, right? All that use case is covered in the cloud, and we're going to see. So and then we will also compare, right? So we'll look at in terms of like persistence. When you get the word persistence, it just persists, meaning can it retain data, right? So persist is the word for it. You also look at performance, right? Some are more performant than some other ones, okay? And then maybe shared access also. Which one can be shared and which one is just like you can't share it. And then you also be looking at cost. Remember, as part of this journey, there's no time you won't talk about cost because those things they cost you money, right? So if you want to store data in the cloud, it costs you money. So you, as part of your growth, you have to also learn the how these things rank in terms of which is more expensive and why will you choose it, right, for a particular problem. And then how to configure the different storage options that you have out there, and then some cost optimization that you can do, right? Because the things that as part of our job, one of the things you'll be doing is that apart from the fact that you're using the storage, at some point you also want to optimize your cost. You want to be like, okay, maybe I don't need this much volume, or maybe this data is not shouldn't be as fresh as I'm treating it right now. Maybe I could store it in a cold storage and only retrieve it right when I need it. So things like that are basically what we're going to get at the end of this call. So one thing you will also understand is the fact that regardless, right, storage is based on your requirement. It's always based on your requirement. So for example, if you were hosting, if your compute was Windows, right, your storage requirement would be different. If you were doing machine learning in the cloud, your storage requirement would be different. If you were just hosting like a small web application, right, your storage requirement is going to be different. So just know that storage is driven by your use case. Storage is driven by your use case. There's no one size fits all. When you start your cloud journey, you realize that the storage you choose is basically based on what you are using, right? So sometimes maybe you need like a database. You should understand what the database will need. If let's assume compute that we see is compute, right? But remember that compute can do many things. So there are computes that host database in some cases, right? And in those kind of places too, you also need like a storage. And there, for example, you need your database storage to be persistent. Meaning, if you turn off the machine or something happens, you still want to have access to your data, right? Um, and then you'll be thinking about performance, right? For database, for example, people are doing a lot of operations in the database. You want a storage that is performant, okay? Because I know that in the cloud can give you a database, but you can also host your own. And there are a lot of people that do that in the cloud. They host their own database. They just get a compute and they install their own database in there. You see, okay, so but these storage options are there. Just if you have a database that is inside your compute, you can always use the storage. And there's so many storage options you can use depending on your use case, right? Web application is also a type of compute people do in the cloud. So every web application you see out there, once you click a URL, you go to a browser, there is a compute power in it. It could be it could be a serverless compute. It could be, you know, an EC2 compute. There is definitely compute somewhere, right? And many of those compute sometimes there could be need for them to share storage, right? So one compute A is doing something, compute B is doing something, but they need to keep a common reference, like, and that's where shared file access comes in, because when there's a shared file access, it means that regardless of where they are doing their computation from, they can always make reference back to the file, right? When you think about analytics too, there are people who do a lot of analytics work in the cloud where your storage requirement will be different. So I've given three use cases. So a database, a web application, or an analytics application, right? Those three, if you were to host them, you can't use the same storage. Okay. Um, and like I mentioned, it's based on your how you prioritize durability, speed, cost, and then the sharing capability. In some cases, maybe you want the database to be shared, and in some cases, maybe you care less, right? So all those things are some of the things that will influence your decision in choosing a storage. But everything is there. The elements are there. You just need to know them and then know when to pick which storage. Okay. The good thing is that's where AWS is our friend, because there's so many storage options that AWS gives us out of the box. Like, so everyone, your use case is covered. So regardless of if you have like the dream application that you want to build, AWS has you covered, because there is like a storage for most of the use cases that are out there, and we'll see them. Okay. So at a glance, these are many of the storage options you are going to see as part of your journey. So at a glance, EBS is probably the most popular. So EBS, like Elastic Block Store, is like more or less like the most popular, right? And like I said, it's a network device, so it's not a physical device that is attached. Just people, if you hear the concept of storage based on how you use your laptop, there is a storage device attached to your laptop, right? And it's also a persistent storage, but EBS is a network device, and that's why you can more or less like set up the storage outside of the machine, right? And it can live, outside of the machine also, and persist even outside the machine. Okay, so it's a network device. Persistence is just like, can it retain data? So if you turn off the compute, will your data still be intact? Yes, it is. For EBS, it is durable in terms of, if you power off your machine, your data is still going to be there, right? So most times you use it in a single, and we'll see it, but EBS most times is used as a single instance, right? So more or less like in most cases, at this level of your knowledge, only one EC2 instance can use a particular EBS volume at a particular time. Okay, you can't do like a multi-attach. You can't have two EC2 instance attach itself to a particular EBS volume. Okay, but there's a particular EBS volume that we're going to see later that supports that. Okay, but just know for the most part, EBS volumes are meant to be used by just a particular EC2 instance. So they are good for boot volumes, database file systems. Okay. And there is instance store. I think I've talked about instance store before, but I'm just repeating it. So there is like, it's directly attached to the computer. So think about your laptop, right? Your laptop has a storage that is attached to it. Okay. It has a storage. The only difference between yours and an instance store is that your storage is persistent, the one that is attached to your laptop. But for the case of the instance store that is attached to the EC2 machine, it's like a physical store, like a storage, a physical storage that is attached to the machine. The only difference is that it's not persistent. Okay, it's not persistent, meaning that if you stop the machine, or if you stop the machine, your data is gone. That's what it means. Okay, so it's used for, like I've mentioned, if you want to use cache data, you want to use maybe the data that you just temporarily want to work with, right? You just need a place to keep it. It's there for you. The good thing about it is really the IOPS is very, very high. So there are sometimes people just want to use like a local cache, right? That has like really high IOPS. They use like an instance store for that. They don't really care. The data doesn't need to be persistent. Okay. So if you terminate the machine or you stop the machine, the data is wiped off. That's what I'm trying to say. And then there's really the EFS, right? So Elastic File System, and it's also a network storage. So every other ones that you see there, they are network storage. Only instance store is directly attached. It's just that it's a temporary store. Okay. So NFS is pretty much there, and that's where multiple instances come in, because you can have multiple instances mount the NFS file storage at a given time, and then they can share data. And you see how a lot of times you need that kind of application. Think about an application where there is so many machines that is servicing it, right? And maybe you in the UI as a user, you're basically trying to upload an image. So when you upload an image, it's definitely stored. So it's stored in file, right? The only way another machine can see that image is if they share the file system, and that's where NFS comes in, right? Or like the Amazon EFX. Okay, so because multiple instances can mount it, and it means that whatever file is stored, they can all see it together. Okay, so shared content, home directories, and all that. And then we'll see another flavor called Amazon FSx. Okay, so it has its own unique use case. So EFS is the standard storage from AWS that supports NFS, but there are people who have their own, like more or less, like, especially if you needed like a Windows file system, or you needed your own more or less like open source file system that you wanted to bring into AWS. There is still options, right, that covers you. Also, multiple instances, window environment. We'll see them in details, but this is like at a glance. If you were just looking for a slide that gives you all the details at a glance, is this slide, okay? So what is EBS? I'm not sure. I think it's clear enough, right? So we just mentioned all the options. Now we're looking at EBS. Like I mentioned, it's a block store, right? So, and it's network attached, meaning it's something you access over the network. Okay, it's not something that it's something you have to use the network to access it. Okay, it's durable, so it means that it can live outside the instance. It means if you terminate the instance or you stop the instance, the storage is still there, the data is there, nothing will happen to it, right? Yes, AWS promises 99.9999% availability, right? So what it means is that, yeah, your data is bound to be always reliable or available whenever you need it. Okay, so we've seen that all the times we've been doing, like we have like a 30 GB free tier, right? So it means for this training, in as much as you keep your storage around the free tier, you're not going to pay money from the start, right? So like I also mentioned, because if you look at the diagram there, you see that I did put the machine. I don't know if you can, if this is clear enough for you. I'm thinking of a way. Let me see if I can zoom it further. Let me see, just to be sure. Nope, I can't zoom because I'm already presenting it as a slide. Okay. But if you see the diagram there, it's two boxes. One is one AZ, right? One AZ subnet in this case, and the second one is another subnet. And the first one shows one machine that has an EBS attached to it, right? The second one shows a machine that has two EBS attached to it. Okay. So what it means is that you can have multiple EBS volumes attached to a particular machine, right? And then if you look at your right of the diagram, you see that EBS volumes are things that can also stay on their own, right? They must not be attached. There's no hard requirement for them to be attached to a machine. So you can have them you can just more or less like create them and they can stay on their own. So know those three things. So you can have one attached to a machine. You can also have multiple attached to a particular machine, and it's bound to an AZ. So it's bound to an availability zone in this case. Okay, so it's not something that you can use in between. So an EC2 instance in another AZ cannot use an EBS volume in a different AZ. They must be in the same AZ for them to be used. Okay, so just so you know. And then I also said that EBS volumes, they can stay on their own, right? You can actually have them stay like on their own. Okay, so you can create a volume that doesn't have any EC2 instance using it. It's a network device, like I've said. And I told you, like, multi-attach is naturally not supported unless there is a particular kind of EBS that you use that supports multi-attach. But basically, it's one EC2 instance for a particular EBS volume for the most part. Okay, it's bound to a specific AZ, right? And the good thing about it is that you can also provision your, like, how much GB you need, right? So the size, GB is like the size, and IOPS is like your inputs, right? Your input output, how much of IOPS that you need, right? So, and then you are basically built for that. You are built for that. So it means that you can, like I said, the good thing AWS brings to you is the fact that you can scale your storage outside your volume, right? So your volume is intact, your storage is on the other side, but you can scale your volume outside your storage. It means that you can increase the size, how much data you want to, and then you can also increase the IOPS, right, of the volume. Okay, and then there is always room for you to encrypt the data. So it's something we're going to see as time goes on, but encryption is a big deal, right? So it means, remember, the file, it's a network device, but someone somewhere can go into that storage physically. So it means that's why it is necessary that at some point you think about encryption, because if you store files in your EBS volume and it's encrypted, even if somebody gets the EBS volume physically, they will not be able to see the data. Okay, so these are the components in EBS that you need to know. Here, I will not go into details about the storage type, because honestly, at CCP level, you don't really need to care about the other types as much as you should pay attention to just the first line in there, right? So as time goes on, we are going to learn about the other types. But just so you know, EBS has different, even although it's like a block store, but it has different types that you can use, and they all come with their own different flavor, like basically because of the value they bring to you. Okay, but the most common is really GP3 and GP2, right? And those are really SSD drives. GP3 is the most recent, right? GP2 has been what everyone has been using, but now GP3 is really the thing. So usually, if you are like operating your cloud, you see even notification telling you that you need to move your GP2 to GP3. They're cheaper, and they're more performant. Okay, so as time goes on, you see that there is also IO2 and there's IO1, there's ST1 and there's SC1. They are just flavors of EBS volumes. Okay, I won't go into them. At this level, you just need to care about the one that is on the first line. But it's here in case if you just want, you were looking at this slide and you really wanted to more or less like increase your learning. Okay, they're just different flavors and they bring in their own unique values. Okay, so that's why you see like on the left, you see like some IOPS, you see like their own typical use case, and all that. So we'll see that as time goes on. So GP3 versus GP2. GP2 is really old, right? It's what was there before. But since then, GP3 is the new standard. Okay, so it's 20% lower in terms of price when you compare it to GP2. So if you are more or less like setting up your machine today, don't use GP2, use GP3. It's more performant, it's cheaper. Okay. So the good thing about GP3 is the fact that the IOPS and the throughput, basically you can provision that separately. Usually your GP2 is tied to this to the volume, so it's tied to the size of the volume. So that's how you get more IOPS. But in GP3, you can actually provision that. You can choose how much size you want, how much IOPS, and then how much throughput you want as time goes on. So, and then you can also do like a migration, right? So you can move your GP2, upgrade them to GP3. Okay, so like I said, there's like a baseline. The good thing about GP3 is it really comes to the baseline performance, 3,000 IOPS and 125 Mbps. Honestly, at this level, you don't need all this level of details, but the most important thing in this slide is just for you to know that it's GP3. GP3 is really the new flavor. But if you were ever interested in understanding the difference, right, the difference between GP3 and GP2, yeah, I just wrote some things here. Like I mentioned, if you look at the last line of the slide, one of the disadvantages of GP2 before now is the fact that the size was tied to the IOPS. So as you increase the size, you get more IOPS. But for GP3, you can get those separately. You can choose the size, you can choose your IOPS, you can choose your your throughput. Okay, so it's basically an upgrade. Like I said, there is a concept of multi-attach. You see it as time goes on. Multi-attach. In the picture that I showed you, I showed you an instance that has two EBS attached to it, right? It's different from a multi-attach in this case, because multi-attach that I'm saying is that multiple instances, right, are using the same EBS volume. Okay, so it's not supported. Like I told you, at this your level, you only need to care about GP3 and GP2, so it's not really supported. But as time goes on, you see that IO2 and IO1 they support. You can connect a single EBS volume to multiple EC2 instances. Okay. And yeah, there's many reasons why you want to do that. Remember that EBS volumes are tied to an availability zone, right? So it means that if you ever have like a cluster of services that needs to work in a particular AZ, AZ means they're all close to themselves. So you can build a small cluster and then you can have them share that volume in as much as you don't care about multiple AZs, right? So, and it gives you that consistent access, especially when it is shared. And it comes with a lot of benefit. And one thing you should know is that as time goes on, you see that EBS volumes are things you can actually modify as time goes on, like on the fly, you can modify them. Okay. So, and here I'm also just telling you that, yeah, your volumes, I think I've talked about encryption. They can be encrypted, basically. So it means, like I said, it's a network device for you for the most part, but someone can have access to it. Someone can see that machine, right? So we don't know. Like we just trust AWS that, oh, it's secure, it's protected. So that's why it's always advised it's, you encrypt it. So if you think about it, you also, as time goes on, we'll begin to see what's like a customer managed encryption key versus like an AWS managed encryption key, right? That you can use to encrypt your data. So just so you know, at the high level, yes, EBS supports encryption. You can encrypt the data that you are storing and have that peace of mind that, okay, if someone gets the device, the storage device, they won't see the data that is inside. Okay. So yeah, I think now it's time for me to show you what it looks like. So I'm back to my account. I'm just going to zoom in a bit. So let me just go back to my EC2 instance. So EBS is, you find it around. Most times, if you want to deal with EBS, you have to go to EC2, right? If you see on the left, I don't know how close you can see this, but I think it's better now, right? So if you see on the left, you see instances, right? But if you scroll down, there is also room for volumes. Okay, there's room for volumes. Okay. So what are we going to do here? Let's try and create a volume. So basically, I can go to volumes, right? So I can create a volume. I can create, like this is where I said you can select the options, right? You can select different types of volumes that you can have. Like, so there's room for GP3, GP2, IO1. For now, you don't really need to care about that. But as time goes on, it depends. As you grow in terms of your complexity in the cloud, these volumes, they have their role and you need to understand them as time goes on. So, but for example, if I wanted to create a GP3 volume, here I probably would just need to specify size. And then I can say the IOPS. Remember, 3,000 comes with it. Like I don't need to even change it. 125. For throughput, is there. This is where you have to select like an availability zone, right? Because I told you, and a volume is tied to an AZ. Okay, so if volume is tied to an AZ, so it means that if I had an instance that was in a different AZ, it won't be able to use it won't be able to use the volume in a different AZ. Okay, so that's why here I have to specify which volume, which AZ that am I creating the volume. So if I say US West 2A, basically I'll just leave this option blank. There's an option here to encrypt volume, but we don't really care about it for now. Here I usually like to name my volumes basically. So what did I call the name? I called it yeah, usually this is where, because there's no room for you to give it name. But you notice that if you tag it with a name here, that's what it's going to show. So I'm going to say volume. Let me just call it volume 1, right? So volume, I think it's volume 1. So I create a volume. So you can see I just created the volume, right? So that shows the first image that I shared with you, the fact that the volumes can stay outside of the EC2 instance. Remember, I just created this volume now. I didn't create it as part of an EC2 instance. Okay, I created it separate. So it's here. So I've created a volume. One other thing I showed you in the image is the fact that a volume, although created separately, you can attach it to an instance, right? So what it means is that there is this volume, it's here, and it's currently hosted in US West 2A, right? So this is the availability zone it is hosted. So if I go back to my instances and I look for my instances, I have my web server that is running, right? So here, I can click on my web server, maybe go in, right? One thing basically I can do is maybe I can go to what's the fastest way? There are many ways you can do this. Looking for the fastest. This is instance dates. Okay. So basically, it looks like I can go back to the volume. So I have this volume. I can click on it. I can go. Is this still creating or what? It's in use already. So let me say this. Okay. I should have option. I'm not sure why it's there is like attach. I can attach there, but I'm not sure why it's not enabled. And it's created. I can see that it's created. Well, let's see. But there's another way I can go. Basically, if I go back to the instance and I click on the instance, that was supposed to be an option. I don't know why it's grayed out. But if I go to my instance and I go to my storage, it's remember that a particular volume would have like right now this instance we created it with just the basic storage. This one that is being used. Okay, so what I can do is basically attach another instance to it. So instance state. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah. I mean, where I came from then, I don't know why it's not. It's basically not showing. Which is which now? Was this created from? Yeah. What was I? Which volume was I looking at before? I was here, right? Why didn't I see that option? Or was I looking at the wrong volume? But again, if you go into the volume itself, the particular volume, you can actually attach it. And this is where you pick an EC2 instance, right? So if you see, like I mentioned, the reason why you are seeing this instance showing is because if we go back here, if you go back, you see that the instance that we have running is in the same, if you see it, it's in the same AZ. So it's here. It's launched in US West 2A. It wasn't there before, right? Yeah, I don't know, actually don't know why it wasn't showing. I don't even know. Maybe I was looking at the wrong volume. But one thing you notice is that this is here, right? US West 2A, right? And that's the reason why here, when I do attach, I can see that volume. Okay. So while we're there, I just want to start launching something. Let me launch a new machine while we're on this call. We'll just let it do its thing, and I'm just going to, sorry, just I'm just going to do this, launch it, leave everything as default. I think we've gone through this page before, so I'm just going to go here and choose T2's micro is free tier. I don't really need to do a keep here, security group. I don't need any security group. I'm not testing that. I need a root volume. This GP3 is fine. Which AMI is he using? So I just need to fix the AMI basically. I think I still want to use this one, which is Linux 2. There's Linux 3 you can also use, but I'll just use Linux 2. And then I'll scroll down. I don't know why this UI is a bit it's not as responsive as I want it today. So I don't know if it's me or. And then advanced details. I don't really care about any advanced details now, but I'm really interested in changing the availability zone. So here, if I go back to where is the network now? Let me scroll down a bit. So there's a VPC here. There's no subnet. Let me see. So this is 2C. So let me put it in 2B, right? So let me just put it in 2B, and I'm going to launch the instance. I can proceed without a keep here. I don't need it. So I'm just going to launch it. So while it's launching, let's give it time. But if I go back to my attached screen and I refresh this page, one thing you notice is that I still will not be able, I'll still not be able to see that instance, right? Because they are not in the same availability zone. So I can only choose instances that are in the same AZ. So here, I'm just going to, I can basically tell it to mount at a particular location, right? So, and then I can attach the volume. Yeah, so I basically would just choose that. So if you notice, if I go back to my old instance, the test web server, so this one is initializing, this one is already running. And the good thing you see is that if I go back to the storage, it now has two storage. So that goes back to our diagram that I was explaining, the fact that a particular EC2 can have multiple volumes attached to it. So in this case, you can see that it has this volume, which is the root volume, right? Is the one that basically came with it. And then we just created one that we attached, right? So this one is here. And then one thing you will see is, I'll also show it in the slide, but one thing you see is that delete on termination for the most part, when you create a volume and it's the root volume, it's usually yes. Delete on termination is usually yes, meaning that it's just trying to tell you that if you delete this instance, this particular instance we are talking about, it should delete the root volume, this one, right? Is EBS, it's AZ, it's AZ confined. So if it's AZ confined, it's definitely region confined, right? Because and AZ is within the region, so it is AZ confined actually. EBS is AZ confined, so just know that. So like I mentioned, it's here. Delete on termination is usually yes, right? But the one that we just attached, it has a delete termination of no. Okay, and there's a reason why it's there. So what it means is that you see this one is a different volume, the other one is a different volume, right? So, and this just tells you that if you delete this particular instance, it will delete this volume, this particular one, right? But this also shows you that if you delete this volume, this instance is not going to delete the volume. So we're going to test that out. So what I'm trying to say is that that's what you mean by delete on termination, okay? So it's something you need to know. And then, so what it means is that, so I've just created an EC2 instance. I've just attached it to the machine. So right now this machine has two volumes attached to it, okay? But the only reason why I could do that is because the two volumes were in the same AZ. They are in the same AZ. So let's go back to our launched instance. So it's here, it's running, right? It's running. We are all in one region. So I'm in US West. I'm in US West 2, okay? So if I go back to my instances volumes, for example, the one that I was treating before, even this one, right, is volume 1. If I click on the volume and I try to attach it, right, again, okay, I think this is usually what happened that first time. It looks like maybe it's taking its time to get ready. Maybe it's not ready yet. So maybe that's why we're seeing that option. Sometimes maybe if you do things too fast. Oh, this is volume 1, right? Did I create another volume? Insufficient data. Yeah. So let's create another volume. So I'm going to call this one, I'm just going to call this one volume 2. So if I created volume 2, remember I'm still putting it in. If you check this instance, the second instance that we created, so if I go back to this instance, I want to check the AZ it is. So it's actually in US West B, right? So what I also want to do is to create a new volume and this time put it in US West C, okay? And call it volume 2, okay? And it's just going to be the basic, just going to make it 10, 10 in this case. And yeah, I'm just going to create the volume. So I've created volume 2. This is volume 2. If I try to attach this, right? Did you see how no instances are showing, right? So that's just the thing. So just so you notice that no instance is showing. The reason is because I created a volume in an AZ that there is no instance. So just know, so you know, an EBS volume is tied to a particular availability zone. Okay. So if you want to attach a particular EBS volume to an EC2 instance, they must be in the same AZ. Okay. So don't forget that. So we just created this EC2 instance, right? So this particular one we created, if we check the storage, let's see what's there. So it came with a root volume. So I'm just going to show you. Right now it's here, right? So this one, and you can see it has delete on termination set to true. Let's go back to the second instance that had the first instance that we created, the early one. Let me see, where is it? I think this one, my test web server, the one in 2S, is this one, right? Okay. So what do you think will happen? Remember, if you check this one, the storage, it has two storage, right? One has delete on termination, and the second one has no. So what happens if we terminate the EC2 instance? So let's try and terminate it. Take note of how many volumes I have. Let me go to my volumes tab so that you can see them. So they're like, what do you call it? They're like 4 volumes I have right now. This one is attached to the first EC2 instance, and then volume 1 is also attached to it. So let me delete this instance, this one that has the 2 of them attached. So 1, 2. So let me delete this instance so that you see what I mean. So if we terminate the instance and we delete it, let's give it time. So one thing you'll notice on this side is that what will happen to the volume, we have 4. So if we refresh, it's still terminating the machine. So let's give it some time. But I'm hoping that while it's doing that, we can continue to refresh this page so that you see what will happen. But basically, when you delete an EC2 instance and the volume that is attached to it has the option to say delete on termination, it means that it's going to delete the volume when it deletes the machine. Okay, so if I refresh this, at some point there will only be 3 volumes here, and you can see it is clearly written here, 3 volumes. Why? That EC2 machine has gone, and the root volume, which is the default, is delete on termination, right? So in this case, it's been deleted, and the volume 2 is gone. Okay. And like I just mentioned, I created 2 EC2 instances in 2 different availability zones, but I could not attach them, right? I could not attach one EBS volume in one AZ to an EC2 instance in a different AZ. They have to be in the same AZ. So that knowledge is well established, right? And we've also seen that delete on termination is usually true by default for the root volume. What it means is that if you delete the instance, the volume is also going to be deleted. But when you attach a new volume, you can choose and say, I don't want you to delete on termination. And you can also specify that when you're creating it, right? And then it can preserve. It's just a way to say, can I preserve the volume after the machine is deleted? Remember, I told you that the volume and the machine are 2 entities, right? So you can always preserve one like you can preserve it and say, when my machine is terminated, leave the volume intact. Okay. Okay. So the question now is that, so we said a particular volume is tied to an AZ. So if I wanted to use a particular volume in an AZ, in a different AZ, what will I do? There is a way. That's where there is a concept of you can copy a snapshot. Okay, you can copy a snapshot from one place to another place, and there's so many reasons why you do that. One could be, for more or less like redundancy, right? Let's assume you had an application somewhere else that is not in this region, and but you can keep the data there, right? And then something happens in this region, and you need to more or less like switch back to the other region. You can always replicate the volume, the data to that region, and then use it. But because EBS volume are tied to a particular AZ, and I think somebody was asking, yes, AZ means a region, right? Because AZs are within a region. At the beginning, we said that. So it means that if I wanted to use the volume in a different AZ or different region, I have to copy it over. Okay. So what it means is that if I look at this volume 2, right now volume 2 is in. So let me show you. For example, we still have 2 EC. I don't know how many EC2 instances we have. So we have. There is currently 2 EC2 instances, right? If you notice, the one that is running is currently in US West 2B. That's the one that is running right now. So let me check the volumes. Is there anyone in? There is this one, which is the root volume, right? We don't really have anyone in US West 2. But what it means is that, like I said, you can actually do this and do action. So we have a volume, right? So this is volume 2. But if you think about it, it's actually in what do you call it? It's in a particular AZ, and it's US West 2C. Right now, it looks like we have volume everywhere. Maybe it's not a good example, but I'm thinking of an easy way for you to get the concept. But let's see. Okay, we'll come back to it. Let's go back to the slide so that it's easy for me to exactly show you how I want you to get the concept. So let's go back to the slide. We'll come back to that page just now. So just give me a second. So like I told you, there's an option, right? You can always encrypt a volume. So when creating, you can always say you want the volume encrypted, but it's not a must. Okay. Here it's clearly stated, like by default, the root volume will be deleted with the EC2 instance. You have to decide if you want it to remain. Okay, which is an option. And then there is many reasons why you want to keep a volume. Let's assume you were using a machine, right? If you delete the machine and the volume also disappears, it looks like you probably cannot go back and troubleshoot if something was wrong. So there are times you want to keep the volume back. Sometimes you keep the volume you more or less like bring it back through another machine and troubleshoot it. Maybe there was something that happened and you wanted to see that, you wanted to replay it, right? So it's one reason why you won't delete it, because you can always say the instance is deleted now, but I can always go back to more or less like reading this volume from another instance, right? So um, I did give a best practice here. Volumes is good you tag them. So when you see, if you didn't tag them, the name column, nothing is going to show. But if you put name as the tag for the volume, that automatically becomes the name of the EBS volume. Okay. So just take note that when you're creating EBS volume, it's good you tag them. Else they're just going to show plain in the EBS volume list page. It's not going to show any name. So when you give it a name tag, it's going to show up properly with the name that you give it. So I just attached an image there that shows what it does. So the thing is that I think I was already talking about this, but I actually wanted to share the concept very well before I show you what it looks like. So like I told you, a particular volume is tied to a particular AZ, right? So and when you say AZ, right, AZ is unique to a region, right? So US West 2A is unique to the region US West, okay? So what it means is that in as much as it's tied to an AZ, it is tied to a region. In as much as it is tied to an AZ, it is tied to a region. Just give me a second. I need to go through this verification a bit. Let's see. So, in as much as it is tied to an AZ, it is tied to a region. So the question is that what if you wanted to move the data to a different AZ? It could be a different. It could be a different. It could be a different AZ. It could be a different. It could be a different AZ in the same region, and it can also just be from one region entirely to a different region, right? And that's where the concept of snapshotting comes in, right? You can take a snapshot of an EBS volume and then choose wherever you want it to go to, and that's why I have this diagram basically. So when you create a snapshot, AWS actually keeps the snapshot in S3. You don't manage the S3 layer, but that's where AWS keeps it, and then you can always restore from that snapshot. Okay, so what is open, what is visible to you is really the snapshot that you took, right? So the S3 layer is taken away from you, but you can always see your snapshot and you can always restore from a snapshot. Okay, and that's how you do basic copy. That's how you can move from one place to the other. So you can, and you can even do that while the machine is basically on. But in most cases, it will also tell you maybe you want the volume to be the snapshot to happen. It is preferable, it is advisable for you to have the machine in a cool down state, right, before you take the snapshot. But there sometimes you can also take it on the fly. It just depends on your consistency needs. Okay, and like I said, there are many reasons why you want to do it. Maybe you want like a more or less like another application that is running a different AZ, that is like your disaster recovery AZ. And then if one AZ something happens, you just want to boot it up immediately in a different AZ. So what it means is that you can always copy the data from one availability zone to the other availability zone. And when something happens, you can always replay that data, right? So if you can see the diagram I have here, the volume is in US West 2A, but I can take a snapshot and then I can restore it in a different region, okay? Let's see. So we'll show what that looks like right now. So let's go back to where we were. That's why I said I needed to show you that slide so that it becomes clear. Okay. So here we have, remember, we have this, and it's currently in 2 US West 2C, right? So what it means is that I can actually go into this volume and I can create a snapshot, right? So I can call it, I'm not sure what the name is. So let me look for the name of the volume first. Let me go back and look for the name of the volume. Just to be sure, what's the tag? So the name is volume 1. So I'm just going to call it, sometimes it's good to name things properly so I'm going to call it volume 1 snapshot. Where was I? I was here. I was trying to take a snapshot. And then I'm going to call it volume 1 snapshot. Okay. So when I do volume 1 snapshot, I'm just going to create a snapshot. I should have tagged it, but let's see. So on the left, so volumes are different, right? Volumes are already things that you've created. Sometimes you can create it out of the snapshot. Sometimes you can create them, in isolation. But most times you can also have your volume being, they can stay on their own. You can also have them attached to EC2 instance. But snapshot, like it's just like a copy at a time, at a given time, right, of a particular volume, a particular EBS volume. So if I go to snapshot, you see that it's a different page on its own, right? And you can see that here, there is a snapshot being taken. The progress right now is 99%. So when you say snapshot, it's like a picture, like taking a picture at a time. It's just like, when you take a picture of yourself, right? If you replay that picture after 2 years, it tells you where you were at that particular. So snapshot is just like, it's like a live copy of the volume at a given time. Okay. So when we refresh this, it's now 100%, right? So it's done. The good thing about this snapshot as it is that right now it's like, you can refresh it, it's done. But the good thing about the snapshot is that we can actually, in fact, let me name it. I think it's volume 1 snapshot, right? So let me just call it this name so that it's clear. what the snapshot is all about. But what it means is that I can copy snapshot, right? Which is the big deal about it. So I can copy snapshot. Remember, the volume itself is tied to a particular AZ, which is the EBS volume itself is tied to the particular AZ, but the snapshot is not. So if I copy the snapshot, I basically now need to tell it where am I copying it. So I can say, whatever, I can name it whatever I want to name it. But now this is where I can give it a destination. This is where I can choose where I want it to go to, right? So it's in this region. Time-based, I don't really care. Encryption, I don't really care. I can also name it. So here, right now, I'm in, what do you call it? I'm in a different, where am I? Something is something is just happening with my copy snapshot, right? So I can do this, right? So I can copy the snapshot to a different region in this case, right? So I'm in US West 2, but I can actually copy to, let's see, maybe US West 1, right? And just say, what's it called now? Let me say, call it volume 1 snapshot, right? Good. And then I can copy the snapshot, right? And then you can give it some time. I'm sure it's going to do its thing. But if I go to maybe US West 1, right? So let's see. If I go to US West 1, I check snapshot, it probably is here, right? So it's here. So you can see the snapshot that I just created. This one was created some time ago, but it's already here. Okay. So I'm going to just delete this because we don't need it. I'm just going to delete it. Okay. So I'm just going to delete the snapshot. Okay. Just going to confirm it so that I know I don't have any volume lying around in US West 1. Okay, so let's go back to our original region that we were before. So I was in US West 2. So I'm going to go back there, and then I'm going to go back to this snapshot. So this is a snapshot. So what else can we do with this snapshot? If I come here, okay, so one thing I can also do is I can create volume, right, from a snapshot. Okay, so if I do create volume from the snapshot, this is where the power comes in, because remember I just did a copy. I copied the snapshot from one region to another region. But what if the same snapshot I also wanted to use it for a volume that is in a different AZ? And that's where I can do this also. So I can say I want to create a volume of the snapshot, right? And in this case, if you remember, this snapshot was created from what do you call it? Let's see if it has like a description. I'm thinking of we call it volume 1 snapshot. So it means volume 1 snapshot. If we go to volume 1, that will tell us where it was. So volume 1 was in US West 2A, right? So what it means is that if I'm trying to create volume from this, I can actually now take it to a different volume and a different AZ entirely, maybe 2S West D, right? I can keep everything default and call it what do I want to call it now? Volume snapshot, volume snapshot. Is it snapshot 1? Okay, so I'll just call it this, and I'm just gonna create volume, right? So when I now go to volumes, now there is a new volume basically, and the volume is in what do you call it? Let's see. Yeah, it's here, US West D. Okay, so US West D. So the volume is there. So what it means is that I can now launch a new instance that is in US West D using this volume. So snapshot is really the key for you to move things around. This snapshot is really the thing, and you're going to see it. For now, just know that snapshot is just you're taking a copy, right? And you can use that copy to duplicate it across AZ, and you can also use that copy to duplicate it across regions, right? But one thing you should know is that it's really the foundation for you to do for you to use volumes in different AZs or in different volumes. Sorry, in different AZs or in different region. Because I said that EBS is tied. It's always tied. Never forget this. It's always tied to an AZ. Okay, the volumes are always tied to an AZ. So all these are available. It just means they are not being used. So this one that I created that is in 2D right now, no instance can use it because I know there is no instance that I have that is running in US West D. I know I don't have any instance. So that volume is just going to be there. And whenever you see them showing available, it means nobody's using it. And usually sometimes it's one of the cleanup people do. You go to the cloud, there are checks that can tell you when volumes are not being used. And it's always a nice idea for you to delete it, right? Because if it's not being used, that's when you see that if you go to volumes, you see that it's showing available, right? Only one is being used here, okay? Yeah, so we've seen that we can copy the snapshot from one region to another, right? We've also seen that we can copy, create a snapshot and then create a volume of the snapshot in a different availability zone, right? So snapshot is really the key for you to use the same volume, whether in different AZs or in different regions, okay? Just so you know. Yeah, I think pretty much that's it. And honestly, volumes, like I said, they are different. They are things that are different from the machine, right? So it means that they have their own lifetime. So like this volume that I created, if I wanted to delete it, why not? I can just go and delete the volume and it's gone. Because the device is, it has a life cycle that is outside of the machine, right? And you can also go detach the volume from a machine and remove it if you want to. So I think we've touched the areas that I wanted to share. Let's continue. So we just talked about snapshot. So snapshot is a big deal, right? In terms of like moving copy of data from one, whether it's from one region to a different region or from an AZ to a different AZ, right? You take a snapshot of it and then you create a volume of the snapshot in a different availability zone, and then it's there for you to use within your EC2 instances that are in that availability zone, okay? There's now two advanced capability that I want to talk about, and that's the snapshots archive and then recycle bin. So remember, we said you can create snapshot, right? But if think about it, that you now have so many snapshots that you have. Over time, it's going to cost you money. And the reason is not because the snapshot is being used, it's because the snapshot is taken. Remember, we're just playing with tiny volumes, we're playing with 10 GB, but honestly, my day-to-day, we use like heavy volumes, like some in terabytes, some in hundreds of GB, right? So over time, if you continue to take snapshot like that, it's gonna occupy space, right? And that's where there's a feature of recycle bin, right? And there's also the feature of archiving. And honestly, like I said, AWS tries. They do well in naming, honestly. And that's one thing that can also help you when you go for the certification exams. Apart from the practical, like apart from knowing how to do these things, you can also help yourself by basically being able to know this, just know the name and be able to relate with it. Okay. So archival is basically you're storing it in a less expensive storage. So it's like archiving it, right? And then recycle bin is just like I want to be able to retain the data in case I change my mind. Recycle bin is really recycle bin, right? The same idea that you know about recycle bin, right? The fact that, oh, I deleted something mistakenly and then I want to get it back. So that's the whole idea of recycle bin. But archiving is basically you're archiving it to a cheaper storage, okay? So that's why I said here, snapshot archive is basically moving it to like an infrequently accessed snapshot, just to lower that your cost that you're bearing, right? It promises up to 75% cost reduction. The only thing you need to take note of is that if you move something into an archive, it will take 24 to 72 hours for you to restore the data back. Okay. So you have to make sure that your workload covers that kind of use case, because if you archive it, don't just think that, oh, in the next 1 hour I can bring it back from the archive. It takes some time. And then honestly, recycle bin, like I mentioned, is just basically you say you set it up and say, I want, if I delete a snapshot, please don't delete it completely. And I'll show you after this slide. But if you delete a snapshot now, it is completely deleted. Okay. And archiving just recycle bin keeps it somewhere where you can always go and restore it. I think it's normal. It's something you're already used to. It's just that it's also there in AWS. Okay. Protects against accidental deletion, right? And enables you to do recovery if you wanted to, right? Okay, cool. So let's go back to what that one looks like. So we just saw that we could create snapshots. So we have volumes right now. We still have like 3 volumes. So it means that we could play with these ones, right? So if I go to volume 2 and I create a snapshot of it, right? So create a snapshot, and I think I'll call it volume 2 snapshot. Volume 2 snapshot, right? I like to tag things, so I'm just going to do name as volume 2 snapshot, right? Cool. And then I'm just going to create that snapshot. So remember, I think we've created snapshot before. We created one in a different region. I went there, I just deleted it, right? Immediately I deleted it, it's gone. I can't get it again, okay? But one thing you know is that if I go to snapshot right now, right, there is a concept of a recycle bin, okay? And it's just here, it's there, you can't miss it. But there's a concept of a recycle bin where you can, let's give it time. So you can create a retention rule for a recycle bin. You can say test retention rule. Like I said, it's just a bin, right? So you can, I don't really care about any description. And then you can retain, you can choose like what do you want to retain, like you can choose your resource type, in this case EBS snapshot. That's really what we're talking about right now. So you can say my EBS snapshot. You can specify that I just want to retain everything about my EBS snapshot for a particular period, just to confirm that the deletion was in fact necessitated by the user, and only for that reason will it completely be deleted after that time, right? So here you can say all my resources, and then I can say obviously we create tag. So you see, one thing you need to notice is that the fact that if I do 366, let's see, will it work? 366, so it's not going to work. So it means that you have to only retain it between 1 day to 365 days, right? Sorry, 365 days. So what it means is that I don't really need to care about the other things. I can just create the retention rule. So now maybe in my own case, for this test, I can just say 1 day and just create a retention rule, right? So now the retention rule has been created. So what it means is that if I go back to my snapshot and I go to volume 2 snapshot, for example, right? So prior, if I deleted it, it will go, right? To just disappear. But now, what if I delete it? So if I delete the snapshot, I'm just going to do delete, and then I'm just going to do delete, right? Cool. So what happens if I go to recycle bin? Resources, let's give it some time. I think it usually takes some time, but this is like, you know how you delete something, yeah, recycle basically, it just gets somewhere for you that you can recover. So I think it's going to take some time for it to get here. Let's see, but if we continue to refresh, it's going to take some time, but at some point it's going to get in there. So let's see if we can wait for it on this call. Uh, I don't know why it's not. It should take some time, but let's see. So because we already have the rules set up, right? There's a rule here that says keep it for 1 day, um, and then so the resources is still not showing up yet, but ideally it's supposed to show up here, and that's why you have the option to recover, right? There is an option here. If that's the snapshot that you deleted, if it came here, like we're still waiting for it, but once it's here, you can actually filter based on your snapshot or your AMIs, and then if it's here, you can always recover it if it was an accidental delete, right? And that's really one of one of the ways you can move data to the recycle bin. Shouldn't take this long to get here. I don't know why it's taking time. Is there something about this rule that is different? It shouldn't take this long. Yeah. There's nothing. I don't know why it's taking time to come in here. I think it takes. Uh, yeah, it takes time. Ideally, it's supposed to be here. Like whatever I deleted, it's supposed to come here. But let's wait. Maybe we'll still find it in the recycle bin. So another thing again we talked about is really archival, right? So all these are in the concept of a snapshot. Okay. Snapshots, remember, they are like a point in time shot of like your volume, right? So for this snapshot, for example, we could say we wanted to archive it, right? So there's like an archiving option down here, okay? Um, so you can do like archiving, and then you can archive the snapshot, for example, and then it's going to tell you some things like, it might lead to higher storage, blah blah blah. But we've seen that if you archive it, it takes some time to basically get the data out. But once you click archive snapshot, it's just going to archive it, and then you can always replay it back if you wanted. So just so you know, at this level, you just need to know about those two patterns of what do you call it? I'm not sure why that one didn't work. It's really all resources, right? Uh, yeah, I have it. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for it to show up here. It's supposed to it's supposed to have been here by now. Um, hmm. It just hasn't come here. But ideally, when you delete, it's supposed to come in here, and then you can always there's a recover option here, so that in case you wanted to recover it. Um, yeah, that is that for that. Okay, so I think we still can cover one more concept before we keep the slide exactly how we want it. So we've talked about the archive, and then we talked about your recycle bin, right? And I think we've talked about AMI before, right? I think we talked about AMI. So at the point where we're discussing EC2 machine, we said that there's no way you can launch an EC2 machine without having like an AMI. And an AMI is just a machine image, right? That tells you what do you call it? It mostly tells you the OS that you want to use, right? So in most cases, that's when you choose whether it's a Windows OS, whether it's Linux OS, whether it's Ubuntu. Basically, it's just an image of the machine, right? And I think I've shared this slide before, but one thing I need you to take note of is the fact that if you check the types, there's really Amazon machine image, right? The one from Amazon. So the Linux tool that we've been using comes from AWS, right? But there is also the ones that we can get from third party, right? But there is also the one that is custom. It could be your own AMI. It could be something that you built yourself, right? And there are so many places where that is useful, because you can have like a basic AMI where you more or less like preload it with exactly how you want it to behave, and then use that as a gold standard for you to build your own application. Okay, so it's not just the AWS AMI. You can take the AWS, you can actually start from the AWS AMI, customize it, and then make it your own, create your own AMI out of it. Okay, so usually people start with a base AMI, they add some more or less like configuration to it, and then that more or less like becomes the starting point for if they were launching a new machine, right? So let's see how easy that is going to be for us to. So here there is like the creation process, right? So if you think about how you create AMI, the diagram there really shows everything. There's an instance. You can create an AMI of the instance, right? So you can create a machine image of the instance. And then once you have the machine image, it's an image. You can launch an EC2 instance from that machine image. That's just what it means. Remember, a machine image is really an image, right? So you can take it from an instance and then use that same image to launch a new machine, okay? And there are many, usually it's always recommended. I think there are some details in the slide that I gave. Usually it's good you stop them and then you take an image of it just for it to be consistent. And then once you have that image, right, you can always create EC2 instances from that particular image. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much. Some of these things are details, but you can always go back to the slide. But like I've mentioned at the beginning, there is an AMI, which is a machine, the image that the machine is using. But what I really want you to pay attention to is the fact that you can have your own custom image, right? You can have your own custom image. So what would that look like? Let's see if we can quickly show that. Let's see. Where were we before? We were in recycle bin, right? Let's see. Is it that I'm not, let me delete this snapshot, this last one. Let's see. Let's delete this one and see. I'm just wondering, is it that the recycle bin hasn't kicked on when we started it? Oh, maybe as at the time we created it, maybe it has not kicked off, right? Maybe it has not kicked off because it wasn't supposed to take that long, but you see it's back, right? So that first time I deleted it, I'm not sure why it didn't show. Maybe the rule has not been created when we deleted it, right? But now I just went and created another one so that you know it works, okay? So it's here now. It's here. I deleted it there, but it's back to the recycle bin. So what it means is that if you go to my snapshot, there is nothing here, right? But if I come here and I do restore, so I can recover the snapshot basically. So I can recover it. And if I go back to my snapshot, my snapshot is back, right? So honestly, it's just recycle bin functionality. But you need to know these things because the way I'm explaining it now, maybe if you sit an exam, they'll be like, okay, is there a way you can, there'll be something around you want to prevent, deletion, maybe accidental deletion, right? Yeah, that's when you should use like a recycle bin. Okay. And then when you see anything around archival, it's basically you wanted your snapshot are beginning to cost you money and you're feeling, and these snapshots are really not things you use often, right? Is there a better way you can do it? That already suggests that you can actually archive it to a cheaper storage and then use it from there whenever you need it. Okay.